it starts off on June 27th of 2013. Matt arrives at the Mammoth Lakes area to hike, camp, and climb the peaks of the Eastern Sierra. Like we said, Mammoth Lakes is about 30 miles, I want to say southeast of Half Dome, like if you were to draw a line on a map. So it's very close to Yosemite. He arrived a few days before a couple of his friends, John and Jill Greco, arrived on June 28th. So John, Jill, and their 9-year-old son checked in at a hotel nearby. Over the next 10 days, Matt and John climbed many of the region's classic routes, like Crystal Crag, Clark's Canyon, Benton Crag, and the Gong Show Crag. They also did a few on the Eastern Sierra's classic alpine routes, including the North Collioure, North Peak near Yosemite National Park, and V-Notch on Pulmomium Peak near Big Pine. So he was doing a lot of climbing all over the place.
I'm jealous of that trip.
Right. So, he had planned to, I don't think he planned to stay in California the whole time. He planned on doing kind of a cross-country hiking trip, and then he was hoping to be home in Pennsylvania no later than August 18th of 2013. So fast forward to July 6th of 2013, and Matt's car breaks down. So he drove a Subaru, and I guess it blew a head gasket, which is why he was stuck there for as long as he was. So while he waited to get his car fixed, his friends kind of went on to the next location because they actually had to get back for some stuff. So John and Jill, like I said, were scheduled to leave Mammoth Lakes on July 7th, as John had a work meeting in Southern California the next day. So Matt said, once the repairs were finished, he planned to drive to Colorado to join some other friends for more climbing. So the morning of...
Yeah, it sounds like all of his friends were like strictly climbing community.
Yeah.
Probably like through the internet or type something.
Yeah, and being 39, he's probably been climbing for a long time, so you build up a good friend base of, climbers. So the morning of July 7th, the whole group they hiked to Emerald Lake in the Mammoth Lakes Basin. Before Matt continued up the trail to the Mammoth Crest, John and Jill headed back down to their car to begin the drive south. This would be the last time that any of Matt's friends ever saw him. So we're talking July 7th. So now over the next 8 days, he continued to climb the Sierra peaks and routes that took his fancy, checking in with John and Jill via text every few days. So
okay, so they saw him there, but they know he was completing those mountains because he was texting them and updating them. Okay. Yep. I was just going to ask him, like, how do they know that he did all these other things?
Right. So July 8th, now 2013, Matt solo climbed the Regolith Minaret, a 10,560-foot peak in the Ritter Range west of Mammoth Lakes. The next day, he climbed Dana Couloir, a popular 1,200-foot ice route on a 13,000-foot peak near Yosemite Park's eastern entrance. On July 11th, he took a shuttle to Red's Meadow Valley to hike and climb the Minarets in the Ritter Range again. He got off at the shuttle at Devil's Post Pile Trailhead and climbed the 12,280-foot Clyde Minaret, the tallest of the Minaret peaks. Now, finally, between July 12th and 15th, Matt hiked a cross-country route on Mammoth Crest and climbed Unicorn Peak in Yosemite's high country. So he was, wow. I mean, just reading through everything that he did, I get tired.
Yeah.
I mean...
So it was like 4, 5 days, 6 days?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That shows you, A, the experience he had, and B, the kind of how physically fit he was.
Yeah, he's a serious climber.
Yeah. So we're fast forwarding now to July 16th of 2013. So Matt was staying at this campground called Shady Rest Campground in the Mammoth Lakes area while his car was getting repaired. He planned to stay at this campsite until July 17th. According to his family, Matt made a phone call to his mom, Patricia, to check in. She said, "It's not like I heard from him every week." She said, describing her son as a loner who loved being in the wild. He just kind of liked doing his own thing, she said, adding that he lives by himself in Bethlehem. So on that call, he, explained to her that he wanted to get on glacier ice, and that meant the Ritter Range in part of the Sierras. So this kind of gives people a little bit of an idea of where he possibly could have gone. I think you'll see the theme here. Ritter Range is kind of where I think everyone thought he went. This would turn out to be the last contact that Matt would have with anyone via text, phone, or in person. So that was July 16th. So fast forwarding now to July 21st, and I'll stop here for a second. So this timeline is, I pieced this together through a lot of different news articles, and there's a Facebook page that the family of Matt started, and it had very detailed timelines of kind of not so much what happened before he went missing, but kind of everything happening after. So I tried to pull information from a lot of different sources. So this is probably one of the more in-depth timelines we have from the stance of like family and friends. Usually it's more based on reports from like search and rescue officials and things like that.
So because of all the research you've done, you've cultivated potentially the best timeline of these events that's out there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take it from everywhere and piece together things that are missing in different ones. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Thanks, Joe. So like I said, July 21st, after 3 unpaid nights at the Shady Rest campground, the owner reported Matt's abandoned campsite and his suspicions of a missing or overdue person to the Mammoth Lakes Police Department. Officers responded to the call and visited the campground and recorded the information on a police log. Camp number 164 was left intact, and Matt had not returned to it with his clothes and gear still inside the tent, and his food was stashed nearby in a bear box. The tent was subsequently taken down and Matt's gear put into a storage locker with the assumption that he'd be back to collect it at a later date. So that was on July 21st. Now, unfortunately for Matt, the missing persons report wasn't filed until July 29th. So we always say in these cases that time is of the essence when someone goes missing.
Yeah, it could. I mean,
and we don't know.
That could have been like 12 to 13 days from like where the last contact was, assuming he went missing right away. That's a long time. Or potentially almost 2 weeks.
And unfortunately, we do not have a we know he talked to his mom on the 16th, and we know the missing persons report was filed on the 29th. We don't know when in that time period he actually went missing. So it could be 2 weeks or it could be 2 days.
Yeah.
But it's always the longer it goes from the last point of contact to when they're reported missing in the search and rescue mission starts.
Do you know if he was always texting when he would complete things with his friends? So we could say, like, if he went complete silence after talking to his mom, if they're saying, hey, we haven't gotten texts or anything.
The friends did mention that they found it kind of odd that they stopped getting texts from him.
So I would say reasonably we could say shortly after he had contact with his mom is when he went missing.
Probably within a few days after that call with his mom, he was the actual point where he went missing.
Yeah. I would only say that based on just when I do a mountain, like I'll at least text my wife because I'm like excited. Like if he's conquering all this stuff in like record time or whatever, and he's texting him almost like bragatory, like, hey, I did this, and then that just goes dead.
Yeah.
That's abnormal. So I would argue within a few days of talking to his mom is probably when he went missing.
And honestly, we can say probably based on the owner of the campground reporting on July 21st that he still hadn't been back to his tent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we can probably, while we don't have verifiable proof, I would say between the 16th and 21st is when he probably went missing.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't know for sure, but so even going on the 21st, that's a long time, 8 days before a missing persons report is filed. So moving forward a couple days, July 31st, Detective Hornbeck, so he's one of the guys working this case from the local law enforcement. He contacted Verizon for emergency information request, and they said his cell phone had been powered off for quite some time, and there was no way to track the current location. They went on to say the last ping was registered to a cellular tower over Mammoth Mountain on July 16th, which the fact that his car was in the shop, he may have had no way to charge his phone, so that doesn't necessarily mean he went missing on the 16th. That just means his phone died. But again, I still think it was between the 16th and 21st. So, according to Detective Hornbeck, the ping created a cone-shaped triangle with towers in Fresno and June Lake, indicating that Matt's phone was located within that region, which consists mostly of Ansel Adams Wilderness. Hornbeck notified Bill Greene at Mono County Sheriff's Search and Rescue, but since Matthew Greene did not tell anyone where he was going and his car was still at the workshop, they couldn't determine a start point for the SAR search. So this is one of the things Joe and I talk about all the time, is you always let somebody know where you're going.
Yeah.
Even if you're by yourself, leave a note, leave something in your tent, because you'll see in this case, the search and rescue mission couldn't really kick off because they're not going to start searching for someone if they don't have an actual location to look for.
It's such an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And it can mean, I mean, look at these people have a cell phone ping and they still aren't entirely certain because you have a radius.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about days in the mountain above tree line where there could be snow or cold at night, you might only have a couple extra days.
Yeah.
If you're prepared.
So, a good tip for anyone hiking by themselves is leave a note in your car, leave a note in your tent, time, date, and where you're planning to hike. Because if you do go missing, that will give them a point to start looking. If you don't do anything, they're not going to start a search because they can't just, search 1,000 square mile area for you.
Absolutely.
So, and the Detective Hornbeck goes into, so I have a quote here from him. Regarding his cell phone, the last call he made was to the garage where his Subaru was being fixed. Based on the cell phone latitude and longitude, it's possible that your brother was hiking northwest of Mammoth Mountain. This is a large area, and search and rescue doesn't have enough information to start a search. I've also placed flyers with your brother's photo at the mountain and ranger station. So right off the bat, they can't start the search because they don't know where he is. And then on August 1st, the Mono County Search and Rescue Team pretty much stated the same thing. They were notified of Matt's disappearance. However, they were unable to start the search because they didn't have a last known location. So
I still think, now I'm assuming they started searching anyway. I feel like that's at least enough information to start versus other ones we hear about where it's like, there are cars at the trailhead.
Yeah.
Like, that's an even bigger, like, I feel like with the lat and longitude, if they have triangulated cell phone signal,
yeah,
like, I can understand why they don't want to start there if it was like you said, it just died and he's actually somewhere else. But the alternative is no information at all.
Yeah. Well, and, they started piecing together. It was kind of like a puzzle, and we'll get into that a bit here. But on August 3rd of 2013, Matt's friends were working with the search and rescue teams. Matt had a guidebook, and it had pages torn out for the Mount Ritter area, whereas pages for the Mount Lyell were untouched. So his friends were pretty confident that he was in the Mount Ritter area. So SAR personnel started going into that area, but by land, but due to some nearby forest fires, there weren't any available helicopters at that time to start the search, though they had been approved once some became available. It goes on to state that additional SAR crews hiked up Mount Lyell to check the summit register. Ground crews were also heading up to Mount Ritter at the time. It was later confirmed that Matt never signed the summit registers on Banner, Ritter, or Lyell. So,
and I'm guessing he typically did, and that's significant.
Yeah, I think a lot of these guys, will sign those as kind of, it's, evidence you were there, you did the summit. So yeah, there is proof that he didn't reach the tops of at least those 3 mountains. So this is the evening now of August 3rd, and the SAR team provided an update to Matt's friends. They wrote, "Nothing found by today's ground crew. Working on getting more ground crews for tomorrow. Helicopters should be doing aerial search a little afternoon tomorrow. Flights depend on the amount of smoke from the forest fires west of Mammoth." When SAR was asked if they had summited Ritter, they wrote, "Long approach, so team concentrated on lower areas of the mountain, still working tonight on getting a big helicopter to transport summit team in tomorrow to the base of the snowfield." So, they were kind of slowly making their way up some of the mountains, kind of searching the lower levels of, Ritter. Going on to August 5th of 2013, The friends and family received a new update from the SAR operation. This one was a little more detailed with kind of what they had been doing. Unfortunately, nothing had been found at this point. They had ground crews scouring the area while a helicopter was doing an aerial search. The helicopter crew did take a lot of pictures that will get analyzed for evidence of Matt. The SAR team was actually starting to pull permit information from everyone who signed summit registers at nearby peaks to see if anyone had encountered Matt or, had any information about him. And officials once again went through Matt's gear and determined he was not equipped to overnight in the area. His tent, bivvy, sleeping bag, stove, heavy jacket were still with his gear. Additionally, no rope or technical equipment were missing, so they believe he wasn't planning any climbs at the time of his disappearance.
Yeah, that sounds more like potentially a day hike.
Yeah. However, so I pulled this from the family made some comments from the Facebook page. They wrote, however, some items that could be considered technical gear were missing, including mountaineering boots, step-in crampons, one ice axe, his large pack, his cell phone, and digital camera. So
that sounds like, because I carry that.
Maybe he was planning to cover some snowfields.
Snowfield. That's exactly what I thought. If he brought his camera, he's probably going to go hike up a snowfield, take some photos, and be done with it.
He did mention to his mom that he wanted to get up on some glacier ice. So
yeah, that makes sense. That would be, I'm leaning that way.
So moving on to August 10th of 2013, I got the sense doing the research for this case that the community of Mammoth Lakes overwhelmingly was coming out to support the search for Matt, so much so that the search and rescue teams had to make an official note, like, to the public, and they wrote, anyone helping needs to understand that this area is serious terrain. The altitude alone will do in many people. Just being a willing searcher who loves Matt is not enough. Anyone going into the backcountry needs to be skilled at handling the rigors of the mountains. Otherwise, there is a risk of them becoming a victim as well. So
I'm sure that can be scary for a SAR to assume crowds of people going out, and then that turns into
multiple missing persons.
Or if someone gets stuck and they have to be rescued, you're pulling away from resources, even if it's fine. So, but also shout out to that town, who I think really cares about keeping up that, camaraderie amongst those types of people. I'm sure that keeps the tourism and the money going in that area. So,
well, you got to think when, these search and rescue teams are going into these really dangerous areas, like, they are at a huge risk of potentially what happened to the person they're searching for.
Yeah, we've already done at least one case where SAR people have died in the operation looking for other people. So there's definitely not a no-risk scenario for them, even though they're experts at it.
Yeah, and honestly, this is one case where I think Matt was probably more experienced than maybe most of the people searching for him.
It's possible. I think it's possible. Yeah, you get up to that level, somebody that, like you mentioned, Alex Honnold. If anyone's ever doing a climbing rescue, he's the best in the world right now. Arguably, I'm sure people amongst the climbing community may argue over it, but
I don't know. That documentary is crazy.
Or maybe he's the craziest one. Maybe.
So moving on to August 13th of 2013, friends and family started searching through Matt's belongings at his house. They got access to his cell phone records and Hotmail account and bank and credit card records. After getting into all that information, there was no new evidence pulled from that. Family and friends also got another update from one of the search teams in the Ritter area. The note read, the guides at SWS have been guiding and climbing the Ritter Range for the last 7 days. All the guides are back home with no reports of any evidence of Matthew. They and their clients have climbed Clyde Minaret, the glacier route on Ritter, the north face of Ritter, the Ritter Banner Saddle, the North Ridge, and the south face of Banner. Best of luck in your search, and we advise extreme caution and safety in your efforts. Many of these lesser-traveled regions in the area are very dangerous. So that's the common theme throughout this case is the area where Matt went missing is very treacherous. Mm-hmm. Definitely not for inexperienced people. And interesting little post here. People started wondering at this time if they should expand the search area outside of the Mammoth Lakes area. And it was really because of a single post on the Find Matt Greene Facebook page. A retired police officer in Minden, Nevada, posted this following comment. He wrote, the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced I saw him in Minden, Nevada on 8/6/2013 at 10:42, walking north on 395. I'm a retired cop and new member of the Douglas County Search and Rescue Team, but did not pay much attention to the guy at first. He had a backpack with what I thought was a burnt orange sleeping bag stuffed in the top. I saw that he had a burnt orange tent, and that could have been it. I saw the article the next day and reported it to the Douglas County, Carson City, and NHP. His options would have been to take Highway 50 to Lake Tahoe or continue on 395 through Reno into California, heading to Susanville. If that was him, I saw that is. Sorry about I'm reading this directly from what he posted. He goes on to say he looked homeless, like he had just woken up, and his hair was sticking up. He also had several weeks of growth on his beard. So based on this post, family and friends actually alerted hospitals and homeless shelters in this area of Matt's disappearance. But again, nothing ever turned up of that.
My gut is that is not him.
Probably not.
After hearing it, like, it's I'd say good for them to follow up on it, but my gut was that's a homeless man.
Yeah.
Based on, especially if he had the tent, because he left his tent at the campground. It's not out of the ordinary for him to have, if he brought a big bag out.
Yeah.
And was planning to maybe overnight in a glacier field with the gear he had. So
that'd be a long, I mean, if he was doing that by foot, that's a long walk.
Not if you run the Boston Marathon. So I'm leaning towards this is not him.
I think, what's that phenomena where once you are aware of
the red herring?
Well, you start seeing it. So
yeah.
like, you know of somebody missing, so now everybody that looks suspicious might be that missing person.
Yeah, it's like confirmation bias or a red
like
herring.
that.
I think it's red herring where you hear something and then you hear it 3 more times.
Yeah.
And so something you haven't heard before or whatever.
Yep. So moving on to August 15th of 2013, the family hires a private pilot and another gentleman, Tom Cochran. They flew a specialized camera called a RED camera over the area for hours, collecting over 100 gigabytes of data. Their plan was to edit the video into still frames and examine each in depth. These cameras were originally developed by the Oakley Sunglasses Company and cost around $100,000, and they're primarily used in big-budget films. The camera is capable of recording high-quality images at 30 frames per second while being zoomed in at 3 times. According to people familiar with the search, this may have been the first time this type of technology had been used in a SAR operation. So this is kind of interesting because we talked about in the Paul Miller case that they use this kind of photographic technology where they take thousands of pictures, and then they analyze for things that aren't nature. So
that's what I was wondering, because I from what it sounds like, okay, you're getting good high-quality images in there, but unless you have software to analyze it, I mean, human eyes going over that would be almost pointless.
So from what I gathered was they were crowdsourcing this, so people were actually analyzing the photos themselves.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Stick the internet on it.
But the difference with the Paul Miller case was, in that case, they fed all that data into a software program that was able to analyze probably, thousands of pictures.
Yeah, used AI to say this is nature, and only showed anomalies to a group of people.
But it's kind of interesting to see kind of the genesis of this kind of search technology take off.
It's really cool.
Yeah, and it's probably going to become more and more common in search and rescue operations because this is back in 2013. Sure. So interesting tool that was used. Going on to August 18th. Apologize here. A team of friends who had been in California searching for Matt returned home, and no new leads or evidence was discovered. So a lot of Matt's friends flew out from Pennsylvania and were helping with the search. This is actually kind of interesting. I would love to get this guy on the podcast for an interview someday. August 28th of 2013, a professional searcher and local resident, Dean Rossnow, was thanked by friends and family for taking up the search for Matt. Dean has participated in over 700 search and rescue operations over 35 years, but based on media reports, Dean didn't turn up any evidence of Matt during his search. So this was kind of cool. Dean did not know Matt and basically just read about it in the news, and he kind of said, I don't think I could ever, rest or sleep well knowing that Matt was out there missing and I didn't use my skills to try and help find him. So that's kind of the reason why he started searching for him.
Yeah, he's got a book on search and rescue in High Sierras.
Yeah.
So we'll reach out to him and try and get him on the show. Or if you listen and enough people have been listening, we're getting some information. If you know Dean or have a contact that knows him, let him know. We'd love to have him on the show, and we'd love to learn more about High Sierras and search and rescue out there.
Yeah, so he actually did an interview with a local news operation out there at the time, and I've just got some quotes from him. So he wrote, "I think the sheriff absolutely made the right call not to search. Within any county in the state, the sheriff is mandated by law to provide search and rescue services for both residents and guests alike. However, a search will only be called on actual actionable information, not hunches or assumptions. By simply not taking a few minutes to leave information with someone, Matthew tied the hands of the sheriff and the SAR team." He goes on to say, "However, in spite of this, the conversations that Matthew had with friends and the gear that he was missing from his belongings said to me he was going to the Ritter Range. His family has largely accepted that he's dead and understands the magnitude of the area. But as a parent without a body, you always wonder. Out of any and all the mistakes Greene may have made, his biggest one was not telling anyone where he was going that day, a mistake that Rosnow said he used to make all the time." He goes on to say, "It may not have saved his life, but it would have given the family closure. My sole intent on finding Matthew was to help the family find peace. As I told them, you hope with every tragedy that something good can come of it. Perhaps the good from this could be the effect Matthew's story has on others. Maybe they'll think twice." He finally goes on to say, "Someday a random hiker will find an item and we'll go see what we can find at that point. Even if one assumed that Greene is somewhere in the Ritter Range, Rosnow said the search would be the ultimate needle in the biggest haystack ever. You could take 100 professional searchers to the area and spend the rest of your lives looking and never find him." So, he's getting at the point that we made about, obviously, you want to tell people where you're going, and he also is stressing how massive this area is, and you could fall and never be found. So I think, he's saying, you could get lucky and find him, but, you could have people out there forever and maybe you wouldn't find him.
Sure.
So, finally on September 20th of 2013, so we're several months since he went missing. Per reports of family and friends, there were still a few volunteer searchers in the area that had been periodically checking in. No new evidence had been found. At this point, family and friends were considering other SAR options, including bringing in professional trackers and a retired officer who had experience with cadaver dogs. So they were considering, all their options at this point.
And I think, just to reiterate, I know you moved on past it.
Yeah.
But what do you say was the most important thing, right? If you're going to do anything right, tell someone where you're at. I mean, I didn't even know that part was coming up, and that's like the one thing we hammered on. So if you listen to this show and you take away anything from all of the episodes, this is the 46th episode, always let people know what you're doing the day you're doing it if you're going out in the wilderness.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's the biggest thing you can do. Obviously, be prepared too. But if for whatever reason you forgot something that day or whatever, if somebody knows where you are and when you're supposed to be back and you're not, and they come looking for you, your odds are greatly increased of being found alive. And then you won't be a topic on our show. And I think that's like, I'd say the biggest unintentional thing that we want to hammer home. When we do this show, it's half entertainment, half interesting, but a lot of people contact us and say, thank you for teaching us this stuff.
Yeah.
Because it will help. Oh, I never thought of that. Every time I go out, I'm going to do this. They message us all the time. Have your itinerary, and if it changes, let somebody know. That's it.
And I actually, so the family posted on a lot of different hiking forums, and one of the things that I saw that kept coming up was people recommended, especially for someone like Matt, who is doing a lot of climbing, deep in the backcountry, buy a personal locator beacon. We've talked about it on lots of other episodes. If you set that off, it's going to give searchers your exact GPS coordinates of where you are, and it could be life or death based on that. And I'm not I don't recommend if you're just going on a hike in Glacier that you need one of those. It's probably overkill.
On a touristy trail, like heavily traveled, there's signs along
honestly,
it.
if you can afford it, it's just another peace of mind kind of item that you can have with you in case something happens.
Well, and if you're buying climbing gear, you can afford it.
But
I have climbing gear. It's not cheap. An ice axe costs as much as a personal beacon. And like some of the cheap ones that you can. And you can rent them.
Yeah.
You can rent them. There's some insurance companies that insure extreme explorers.
Yeah.
And you can, for a specific trip, rent it for that trip. So if you're going somewhere like that, you go get it.
Especially if you're hiking alone, deep in the backcountry.
Especially if you're alone.
I would just recommend buying one. Worry about the cost of using it if you get lost. Like, it could save your life.
Yep.
And a lot of these experienced hikers on these forums, even back in 2013, were kind of like, yeah, he should, most guys don't carry these, and they should. The ones that are serious, climbers like Matt was. So unfortunately, he didn't have one of those with him. So also at this time, they opened up a missing persons case in Matt's hometown because they wanted to seek warrants for cell phone and internet history. And law enforcement also spoke with families that were staying at the campsite before Matt disappeared, just to see, because he was actually talking to some of the families about what he was going to do, but none of them could remember, or he didn't mention like specifics. So again, if he just had told one of them like, oh yeah, tomorrow I'm going up the Ritter Range, like boom, you got a last known location.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's just too bad that didn't happen. And then on October 13th of 2013, the family actually got the warrants, and the cell phone and internet logs didn't reveal any new information. So nothing that they didn't already know. So normally, so that's not the end of this story. Something interesting happened in 2019. So on October 7th of 2019, while closing in on the summit of California's second highest peak, climbers discovered skeletal remains. A body was discovered on October 7th near a lake in the remote rock-filled bowl between the towering peaks of Mount Tyndall and Williamson, which rises to 14,374 feet. At the time, the Inyo County Sheriff did not have any leads as to who they belonged to. So family all of a suddenly thought, well, maybe this could be Matt. And there's other missing people in this area that they thought the bones might have belonged to. Okay. However, 9 days later, the DNA analysis came back and determined the remains belonged to Gichi Matasumara. Sorry about the pronunciation. A Japanese man who had lived in an internment camp for those of Japanese ancestry during World War II.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the 46-year-old was living with his family and 11,000 other incarcerated Japanese at the Manzanar War Relocation Center when he joined a group of fishermen on July 29th, 1945, to venture up into the high mountain lakes, according to a news release from the Inyo County Sheriff's Office. Several days later, on August 2nd, he left the main group, venturing out on his own to paint and sketch in solitude among the sweeping mountain vistas. But a storm came in, and in the aftermath, the fishing group couldn't find their lost friend. They hiked down the mountain, hoping he had beaten them back. But he wasn't there and died in the mountains. A month later, a couple nearby, Independence, California, were hiking Mount Williamson when they found his body, the news release says. They had to leave him there, his daughter told the National Park Service in 2018. But, you couldn't bring him down from there because it's too high. His wife, Ido, sent a sheet up with the burial party to cover her husband's body, and the Buddhist church held a funeral for him below at the camp. So
that's like, is morbid, like kind of cool, I guess. Like they got closure, and it like opened up and brought a neat story to.
Yeah, a closure in a terrible time in American history where we had internment camps on U.S. soil in the lower 48.
That's so messed up.
So it's not, a great look for the U.S. at that time, but anytime you can bring closure to a family when someone's lost or missing, I think is a good thing. So it's
absolutely.
It's sad that it wasn't Matt's remains because his family researching this, they pulled out all the stops. Like contacting media organizations, the Facebook page, posting on every forum they could find, flyers. They were flying in to search. They did everything they could to try and find him. And, they couldn't find anything.
Yeah, it's just awful.
Couple interesting notes before we get to our theories on this one. Like a lot of these cases, around the time Matt went missing, there were a lot of bad storms in the area. So the sheriff's office stated that there were 3 days of bad weather in the middle of July, and there were flash floods in the remote mountain valleys, which in the past have cost hikers their lives. There were also hail, thunder, and lightning, but overnight temperatures didn't drop low enough at this time to make exposure an issue for an experienced hiker. So did storms cause his disappearance? Did storms, remove his remains? We don't know. But there were some bad storms in the area at the time of his disappearance. So it's just it's another one of those, every episode we do, and maybe, there's a correlation to people going missing in bad weather in alpine environments. We always talk about not hiking or climbing in thunderstorms. And so, who knows? That could have played a role in his disappearance.
Sure.
Another interesting thing about this is because Matt's car was in the shop, his only option to get to trailheads was walking, hitchhiking, or public transportation. So, there's a lot of, I've been to Yosemite. There's a lot of public transportation there, but, did Matt hitchhike and come across somebody crazy and they abducted him? Who knows? I think it's just a theory.
Yep. I think after a couple of the previous episodes, we can't outrule like serial killers, anything like that. I mean, I would say it's at the bottom of that list, but
yeah,
I have some